The third perspective. A little off I heard a song, noting the tune I sang along. To hear my voice, the tune was gone. The monist perspective is experientially satiating, but to be in awe of the greater thing remains wisdom. The rules that bound experience, including the experience of non-duality, are always permitted. It is an oversimplification to conclude that the ability to experience the higher is evidence of being the higher. There are questions beyond those that we can know to ask, and if there are levels beyond this one, there are greater experiences to be attached or unattached to. Recently, with the aid of an entheogen, I experienced some pre-birth and early childhood memories. I remembered being separated from the source of the light. I remembered that my weaknesses and my strengths were with me right at the beginning. I remembered the first time I glimpsed the intractable conundrum. I remembered beginning to form geometric rationalizations for the world I was falling into. They were simple shapes to fit the new experience. I remembered that as a child I used to be able to see the light in other children's eyes. I remembered beginning to convince myself that I was the creator. It is my sincerest expression to affirm the course that leads back to the light. At the final moment, we either submit or we are exactly where we belong. This world is ruled over by those who have set their view away from the higher truth and created systems to pervert the view of others. It is not hyperbole to describe our realm as hellish. Most often, those making such claims will point to the dishonest nature of the rulers, the dishonest nature of the blindly obedient, and the capricious nature of fate, and the suffering that is the baseline mode of experience. The ubiquity of suffering is one thing, the endurance of suffering is an even more compelling indictment. It is true to observe that we do not have the ability to act collectively to change things for the better. Whatever we do, regardless of how well-intentioned, it sets in motion a host of unintended consequences, and the overall level of suffering remains the same. This point can be demonstrated through the example of an intervention that would generally be considered good to be unquestionably good. It is possible for a woman to suffer a fistula during childbirth. This is where a breach occurs between the wall of the uterus and the bowel. Women in undeveloped villages in Africa do not have access to the medical care that would address the injury. As a result, they continually leak from the bowel into the uterus. They are ostracized and forced to exist on the periphery of their community. There are medical organizations in the West that receive donations from well-intentioned people to travel to Africa and perform surgeries on women with fistulas. They make it possible for these women to reintegrate into their communities and live normal lives. On the face of it, this would seem to be a successful intervention for the good. But what are the second-order effects of such interventions? The woman now has the opportunity to have more children. The population of her village will have been artificially boosted by a foreign force. The additional people will compete for resources, but the culture that underpins the socio-economic potential of the place has not changed. The endogenous regulation of her village has been attacked. For it is not as though a culture that prioritizes female health now exists in her village. It is only that one has been temporarily imposed. Making this observation is not to pass judgment on those who perform such charity. It is only to recognize that intervening only shifts the suffering. A less provocative example from Africa is to be found in the system of clothing donations. Western countries collect items of used clothing and donate them to Africa. Most people accept that this is a legitimate act of charity. It has been observed that the economic consequence of flooding African countries with free clothing was to stymie their development. This is because the first rung on the industrial development ladder is the domestic production of textiles. Whether by design or merely as an unintended consequence, the free clothes and blankets hindered economic development. A more general observation of man's inability to reduce suffering is found in the range of failed political ideologies. Many systems were created in recognition of the nature of man and human weakness. Many were designed to preclude corruption. Regardless of the flavor of the ideology, though, every system reverts to oligarchy, and the founding ideals are worn as a skin suit. In every case, the ruling class come to regard the people as their adversary, and all governments converge on homeostasis at the maximum level of suppression that the majority will tolerate. The law is another example where the desire to make positive changes only serves to shift the suffering. The idea of discretionary sentencing might be a legitimate recognition of varying levels of culpability, but the effect is to create a means for the corrupt and well-connected to evade punishment. The average person might like the idea that the battered wife can receive a lenient sentence for poisoning her husband, but the effect of allowing such discretion is that the well-connected serial child molester gets a minimum sentence. The whole set of technological progress can be seen as a system of shifting the suffering. Work is easier, but people are alienated from production, and working no longer fosters community. Healthcare interventions are more effective, but the overall fitness of the group suffers. People live longer, but spend a decade or so at the end of their life in a frail state, being drained of their wealth. People have more self-determination, but mental health conditions continue to increase in prevalence. The highly refined drugs of social media and digital entertainment have outcompeted older cultural forms. The satisfaction of the home-cooked meal does not overcome the convenience of the delivered one. The level of suffering in this place remains consistent because the nature of the realm is connected to the nature of the inhabitants. This is the case both in terms of physical and conceptual systems, as well as the collective effect of individual minds have on the shared structure that underlies our world. Individuals at the human level might not have the ability to recognize how they work against the original light, or they may choose to ignore the inner voice. In either case, it is not only the rulers of this place that set the tone. Recognizing that the shared elements of perception are collectively formed goes some way to accounting for the pervasiveness of suffering. So many minds are focused on the single life, with each obsessing over trivial interactions. All that attention given to suffering creates the propensity for more suffering. It keeps the wheel spinning. The shared experience of pain is forever refined and sharpened. From the scale of the simplest to the most expansive, individual structures of awareness are the raw material of existence. It does not matter whether an individual falls into this realm from a higher place, or if this experience represents the highest level of incarnation they can achieve. In either case, there is a deficiency that sees them here. If they come from a better place, then there is something in them that suits this place. If they have not been any higher, then they have not overcome the willful ignorance and worldliness that makes them pawns of fallen rulers. In response to this line of thinking, one can anticipate potential retorts from the monist perspective. It might be observed that analyzing how separation occurs is fixating on the delusion. Perhaps it would be said that a question posed on the basis of a misapprehension cannot have a meaningful answer. Maybe the enlightened would observe that from the non-attached perspective, nothing has happened. The total remains consistent in its perfection, and the parts suffer necessarily and exquisitely in their separation. There is a third position between the binary of unitary monism and material delusion. The individual mind is a unique structure of experience. There are shared elements of perception that define the regularity in existence, but individual experience includes past structures of attention. The quality of the moment and the attention that results is different in every case. A popular thought exercise postulates that when different people look at the sky, we cannot be sure that they are seeing the same color. The exercise points at a fundamental truth. Each mind is a singular structure of attention. It is inevitable that they are not perceiving in the same way. The difference in perception is not limited to color. It applies to everything. It is because there are unique elements of perception at the individual level that we can begin to understand that the two poles of monism and materialism amount to a false binary. There is a third position, defined by the continual flowering of genuinely new perception. The recognition of the third axis of experience is an acknowledgement of the thing that is intuitively understood. In this realm and beyond, patterns of attention corresponding to virtue, honor, and sacrifice exist and can be pursued as a matter of choice. One can likewise turn their attention away from higher ideals. The nihilistic surrender to blind materialism and the monist insistence on oneness are both incomplete descriptions. The perspective that emphasizes the individual as the primary locus of existence provides for a fuller appreciation of the significance of a single life in form. Many have lamented the unfairness of being denied the lessons of past existences and reasoned that this must be a diabolical trick of some kind. This perspective assumes that it is possible to bring the entire experience with us. Conscious action is the attention of the mind focused on the form of the body. Conscious memory requires the specific configurations of the body. How could we comprehensively remember the details of a previous life without the relevant body? At the same time, the detailed structures of conscious attention amount to metastructures, and it is inaccurate to claim that we have no recollection. The metastructures that are retained across instances are a mix of strengths and weaknesses, proclivities and fascinations. Critiquing this realm on the basis of suffering is evidence of development and is a requirement for addressing personal deficiencies. The vast majority of people accept the world as it is presented to them. When average people appeal to higher ideals, very often the gesture is an ill-considered and empty social signifier or a hypocritical attack veiled as a virtue. The shared structures that underpin perception extend beyond the realm. Critiquing this place as hellish requires a perspective on the higher. It is a hell realm for those who are beginning to see better places. To the extent that they can overcome their lower nature, it is evidence that they are beginning to belong elsewhere. The rulers of this realm have dedicated themselves to mastering how power functions here. In so doing, they have precluded their perception of the higher. The third perspective on existence does not deny the utility of material explanations, and it allows for the experience of unattachment. It is a perspective that does not require insisting that either explanation is comprehensive or deserving of individual submission. It is the perspective that allows for our hell realm to exist relative to better places, and asks the question, in a hypothetical harmonious world, where truth is not easily obscured and existence rests on symbiosis rather than predation, what would be the value of non-attachment? And, in this world, where individuals have access to a fuller range of perception, what would be the place of materialism?